If you struggle with a feeling of being less than or not good enough, not attractive enough, not smart enough, always not something enough, but aren't quite sure why, you might be struggling with self-esteem or self-worth. You're in the right place. Please watch this video all the way through to the end to learn ways to appreciate yourself, know your true value, and hopefully make peace with who you are. Hi, I'm Sandra Roberts, a licensed clinical professional counselor, and this is Faithful Healing Journeys, a place of encouragement and education in mental health concerns with biblical truth. Today we'll be addressing self-esteem. So if you or someone you know struggles with this topic, watch the video to the end for knowledge and tips on this very important issue. So how much is enough? Good enough, smart enough, pretty enough, tall enough, rich enough, artistic enough, whatever enough. How much is enough? That's an unfair standard to judge yourself by because we don't know the answer to it. If you know the answer, it's one thing. If the answer is a set goal, it's okay. If the answer is it will never be enough, it's not. For example, a long, long time ago, I can't remember exactly when, someone asked John D. Rockefeller, who was one of the richest men in our country at the time, how much money will be enough? And his response is, it will always be one more dollar. There was never going to be enough. He could never attain that standard. And when our self-esteem is at stake and we're using that type of a standard of it will never be enough, we can never be content. Being content with who you are is incredibly important. It doesn't mean you don't want to change. It means you want to change, but you can also accept yourself. So when you say things to yourself like, how much is good enough? How much is smart enough? How much is rich enough? And you say, what does it mean to be a good enough friend, a good enough mom or dad, a good enough person? Define that for yourself so that you have a standard you're looking at. And then ask yourself, is that standard realistic? And then set goals. First, and this is a very important thing to realize, people are not born with low or high self-esteem. Self-esteem is something that is formed during early years and teen years of life, especially when we're building relationships with family members, learning whether the world is a safe place and whether others can be trusted. As infants, we're learning to trust when our needs are met and we're cared for, feeling safe. Relationships with primary caregivers are essential. It does not mean your parents had to be perfect. Definitely no one can do that. All parents make mistakes and have moments of impatience and struggle. But overall, did you feel loved and cared for? When we're a bit older in our adolescent years, we're learning to form relationships outside of family. We attend school or social events and learn if others like us and whether we're acceptable to them. Bullying can impact us as well as feeling excluded. We all experience these things to a degree throughout our adolescence and pre-adolescence years, but if this is a daily event and a child or teen feels that they have no friends or anyone who is socially there for them, it can become a bigger problem and hit self-esteem pretty hard. But more important than these things is how we learn to handle the adversity. If you experienced these adversities in childhood and had at least one adult you could talk to or trust, it will have reduced, not eliminated, but reduced the impact of these difficulties. It's also important to know that self-esteem can be repaired. It takes time and work, and it has to be deliberate, but it can be repaired. So if you experience low self-esteem, you can work to improve it. Remember, it's not an immutable characteristic that you're stuck with. It's something that is learned through a pattern that can be changed, especially once you explore where it came from and how to challenge those thoughts. Watch the end of the video to learn more. Self-esteem boils down to how we feel about ourselves, which is impacted by many factors throughout our lives. How we feel about ourselves is impacted by whether we can accept ourselves, and this includes being able to accept compliments and also being able to accept constructive criticism. If you struggle to accept a compliment with a simple thank you and instead insist that in some way you don't deserve it, this could be a sign of self-esteem issues. But the right thing to do is to simply thank the person for the compliment for a couple of reasons. First, you're acknowledging that they have their own opinion. Whether you believe they mean the compliment or not, take it at face value. You may not agree with them, but arguing the point of it only seems as though you don't allow them the right to their opinion. So a simple thank you here is best. Second, a compliment is like a verbal gift. By arguing the point of whether it's fair or accurate, it's like you're rejecting a gift from them. So even if you don't agree with the accuracy of the compliment, such as if someone says, I love your hair, accept that because everyone is entitled to their own opinion, your opinion of I'm having a bad hair day does not override theirs. You can have your hair any way you want, but it's also important to internalize that they really liked it. So you can believe your hair isn't great today, but you can also accept that somebody else believes it is. Accepting yourself also means you accept that you have negative traits. You're able to see this and decide to make changes without hating yourself or thinking that you're horrible or less than. It means you're able to accept constructive criticism without feeling crushed. It is important to note that constructive criticism is very different than someone tearing you down abusively. The difference is that someone abusively tearing you down is an attack on you as a person, and they might say things such as, why can't you do anything right? Or that's a stupid idea. While constructive criticism is about the event or the performance, and it's about how to improve. So comments about constructive criticism might include things like, I like the way you work so hard on this, but it isn't quite what I'm looking for. Let's talk about some ways to improve it. Notice the difference in the two. One is about you as a human being, and the other is about the task at hand. Self-esteem is also impacted by the way you think other people perceive you. There are several problems with this. You can't read other people's minds, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But even if you could, you shouldn't try to, because a person's thoughts are private. We all have thoughts that come into our minds that we dismiss or don't speak aloud because they don't accurately reflect how we feel or think. And paraphrasing, I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said this. I'm not really sure, but I kind of traced it back to her a little bit. Paraphrasing, what she said was, it's none of your business what other people think of you. That might sound kind of mean, but actually it's very freeing. Once you're able to put aside what others might be thinking about you, you'll find it easier to be kinder and more honest with yourself. And that's the most important thing, is being honest with yourself. Another factor is if you have a history of trauma or abuse. Often abusers blame the victim for their abuse. It's a way to further control the person and might prevent them from leaving or reporting the abuse. Unfortunately, this almost always has a devastating impact on self-esteem. So let me say this to you. If someone has abused you in any way, you did not deserve it. It is not your fault. No one deserves abuse. You might think you should have left or told someone sooner or handled the abuse in a different way. Those are all separate issues, and none of them mean you deserved abuse. Please be sure to check back for future videos, as we're going to have some on healing from trauma and things like that. In the meantime, stop allowing the abuser to control you by agreeing that it was not your fault. It isn't. Self-talk is also very important in self-esteem. If you say mean things or destructive things to yourself that you would never say to another person, it's time to rethink that. If you wouldn't verbally abuse someone else, then don't verbally abuse yourself. Again, we'll have an upcoming video on changing self-talk that can be really helpful in this area, so check back weekly. In the meantime, it's important to be aware of how you talk to yourself and to begin to change it. You don't want to overcorrect and only tell yourself positive things either. Remember, we're seeking truth here and being honest with ourselves. Remember, you need to be able to accept both the positive and negative things about yourself, and this allows you to see good in you where you have it, and also areas where you need to change. Think of it as realistic optimism. When something goes wrong, don't say, how could I be so stupid? Because that's abusive. And while saying something like, I did the best I could is nicer, it doesn't give much hope for improving. What would happen if you said something to yourself like, wow, that did not go how I planned. I'm going to learn from this mistake and I'm going to do better next time. Changing self-talk is a slow process, but the first step is to recognize when you've done it. Once you've made a negative self-comment, don't further berate yourself for negative self-comments. What you say is, okay, is that true what I just said or what I said 2 days ago? Or is that not true? Was that not a helpful thing to say? Or did it allow for areas for me to change and grow? Correct what you said to yourself, even if it's days later, and then this will start a healthier pattern of recognizing sooner and sooner and seeing when you're using negative self-talk and seeing how it impacts you. Changing that and speaking to yourself with truth will also start helping you to see yourself in a more honest way. Cognitive distortions are thought patterns that can cause a consistent negative view of the world, others, and yourself. And it can include mind reading. As we mentioned earlier, this is thinking you know what others are thinking. Overgeneralization, which are things that take one incident and spread it very widely across the whole world, such as I always lose or fail rather than I sometimes struggle. Catastrophizing, which is where we kind of make mountains out of molehills when we don't actually know what will happen. We assume it's going to be the worst or we fear the worst. And there are many other cognitive distortions that can cause negative thought patterns, but those negative thoughts can change the way you think and feel about yourself. So it's important to see things for what they are. An example of changing these thought patterns might be feeling no one loves you or cares about you without true evidence of that. Perhaps you might have 3 different invitations for an upcoming weekend, all of which you needed to decline because you already had plans. And then your plans cancel last minute. So maybe you call the other 3 friends who invited you out, but they've already changed plans and are doing other things. Now you might be spending a weekend alone, and that might feel like you're alone and nobody loves you. But the reality is that you had a total of 4 great invitations and none of them panned out. So maybe what you're really feeling is lonely and bored rather than unloved. It's important to be able to challenge our thoughts and our feelings when they come up and to look at them through a more honest lens to see the truth. It's better to be able to understand the situation and your feelings so that you can challenge those thoughts that will perpetuate negative self-esteem. Thoughts like I'm not lovable become I'm just lonely this weekend. That's kind of hard, but I can manage that. It's also important to note that there's a difference between self-esteem and self-confidence. Those are 2 entirely different things. They're kind of related, but they're not the same. Self-esteem is the way you feel or think about yourself, your value, your worth, and your position in the world. It can be improved by changing the way you accept yourself and knowing yourself better. Self-confidence is your faith and belief in your ability to do certain things. It can be improved by developing new skills, successful experiences, and a mindset that sees failure as an opportunity to learn and grow. So, for example, self-esteem is, do I like myself? Do I think I'm a good person? Do I see my positives and my negatives? Self-confidence goes up and down with different tasks, while self-esteem is pretty much the same in most areas. Self-confidence says, hey, I know I can read very well. I know I can go into a room and talk with people. I know I cannot fly a plane because I've never had any experience with that. Therefore, I have zero self-confidence in my ability to fly a plane, but increased self-confidence in other areas in life. And that has nothing to do with me accepting myself or feeling that I'm a worthwhile human being. This might be a good time to write down things that you have confidence in your abilities in and things that you would like to develop more confidence in and learning to do that. The more confidence we have in certain areas, the more it can improve our self-esteem, but that alone will not change our self-esteem. Self-esteem needs to be developed a little at a time with different pieces in different areas of our lives, and we're going to work on those. Still struggling with where your value comes from and how can you know what it is? Let's get busy on learning that. There's a lot we need to learn about if our value doesn't come from other people, if our value and our sense of worth isn't accurately reflected in our thoughts, where does that come from? Who gives us value? Let's learn a little bit about our worth coming from God. From God Himself is where our worth comes from. If we try to get it anywhere else, we're selling ourselves way short. In Genesis 1:27, it tells us that God created mankind in His own image. So we can know from here that He created both men and women in His own image, meaning He created all of creation and it was good. When He created men and women, He said it was very good. And we are created in His image, which is very different from the creation of any other animal or any other plant or any other thing on earth. We are created in His image. And that speaks volumes about our value. And in Psalm 139, verses 13 and 14, it says, "You created me in my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well." Wow. Write that down somewhere and put it up where you can see it. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. God took the time to knit you together in your mother's womb. It wasn't just left to chance that things would happen. Are we perfect as a result of that? No, we are not, but we are who He created us to be. We do live in a fallen world, so things happen sometimes and we can't change that. But who you are as a human being, God created you. He knit you together, He puts you together, and He loves you as you are. In Romans 3:23, we're told, "Everyone has sinned. We all fall short of God's glorious standard." Why does that belong here in self-esteem? It belongs here for a couple of reasons. It tells us that in spite of the fact that God knows we aren't perfect, and He does, in spite of that, that He loves us still. He loves us anyway. He loves us through all of it. It also tells us that nobody else that is currently living or has ever lived aside from Jesus, nobody else is without sin. Everybody that you admire, that you're aspiring to be like, that you wish you were more like, that you judge yourself next to, every one of those people also has flaws, and every one of them has fallen short of the glory of God. Please don't compare yourself to other people because we're all on a different journey. We all have a different purpose. And although we're all in the image of God, we've been created a little differently. And comparing yourself to someone else who's on another journey in a different way is not fair to you and it's not fair to them. In Luke 12:7, we're told, "Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid." Wow, how amazing. Has anyone ever counted the hairs of anyone's head here in this world that we're aware of? That's a very long task to do, and yet God knows your hairs. He knows each one that you have. He's aware of it. That's a lot of love and attention to detail in who you are. And if you ask Him, He will help you to become all that you've been created to be. And that will feel so good. We often feel bad about ourselves because we feel we aren't measuring up to the standards that the world sets for us. What we're learning here is God has different standards, and while they are all the same in that He wants us to live in a certain way, we are all created differently, and He wants you to become who He created you to be, not what the world's trying to push you into being. That will make you feel better. It will make you feel happier. It will feel amazing to become what He's created. It will feel natural and peaceful. Psalm 56:8 says, "You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book." Oh my goodness, how amazing is that? How much must God love you to keep track of your sorrows, to keep your tears in a bottle, to have a book of all of the things that you've been through. He's been there with you. He loves you. He knows you. He's going to get you through the rough times. This says you are of great worth and value to him. Great worth. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but has eternal life." It goes on to say that God did not send Jesus into the world to judge the world, but that the world might be saved through him. How amazing is it to know that although everybody on earth has fallen short of God's glory, he loves us so much that he sent his Son to die for us so that we could be with him. That is deep, true love, and it screams how loudly he values us. If you didn't have worth and value, he wouldn't have done that. And finally, in John 6:37, it says, "Everyone whom the Father gives me will come to me. I will never turn away anyone who comes to me." That's what Jesus said. So if you thought this wasn't for you, it was just a general thing, turn to Jesus and ask him. He will tell you that if you come to him, he won't turn you away. And if the God who created all that is won't turn you away, what can the world do to you? So at this point, you have a choice on who you're going to believe. Are you going to believe God, who created you for purpose and who has plans for you to prosper you and not to harm you? Plans for a hope and a future, which is what Jeremiah 29:11 says. This is the God who set the stars, the moon, and the sun in place, who forged the Grand Canyon, and he created you. This God loves you and knows everything about you. He loves you so much he died for you, and he has plans for good things for you. Or you can believe the world, which is also created by God, but which does not always recognize him. And the world is trying to convince you of who you are, pushing you into the molds of what it wants you to become, not what God has in store for you. You could also believe the people who have abused you, hurt you, have fallen so far short of God's love that they also need healing. But they're not in a good position to give you any sort of advice about who you are. And they don't know the real you like he does. So you can choose to believe God, who loves you and gives you a true picture of who you are, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly, and shows you the truth and gently helps you to grow more and more into who he created you to be, which is fulfilling and amazing, and who loves who you really are and who you are becoming, or the world and those who hurt you. And they only see the bad in yourself because you're guessing what others think. They only continue to push you into the mold they want you to be, whether it is true of who you are or not. And they're only interested in what they want you to be because it serves your purpose. So it's not about who you really are. Well, let's talk about some ways to improve your self-esteem. One of the things you need to do is you need to start accepting the truth of who you are from God's perspective. This means you're not perfect, you have flaws, and you're on a journey to improve and become what he created you to be. It also means accepting that he loves you unconditionally. Start trying to catch the negative self-talk as soon as possible and correct it, no matter how much later you've recognized it. Changing these thought patterns will over time start changing how you feel about yourself and how you think about yourself. Set up a healing space in your home where you can keep things that allow you a break from difficult times. Too much stress can perpetuate those negative self-talk and negative feelings. So in this little space that's a healing space, keep a treasure box. Decorate it up if you want, or you can buy a really pretty one at a store. In the box, keep things you enjoy, such as puzzle books, novels, tea, chocolate, a You could especially keep a jar of positives in there, like when someone gives you a compliment or when something really good happens to you, write it down on a little strip of paper, fold it up, and put it in your jar or a Ziploc baggie. And when you're feeling your self-worth tank, go in there and read those. Have some favorite scripture verses in there too, and also about successful moments in life or when you had a good experience. Put all those in there. Go through those and reread them. Bring up memories of positive things. That will again start to change the mood and the way you feel about yourself. It's also important to become more assertive. Talk with people who hurt you or joke in painful ways. Let them know how you feel. There's a video on setting new boundaries on Faithful Healing Journeys that you can watch that can help you change relationships with people who choose to continue to hurt you. You can also learn to say no when you don't want to do something. This is a really important skill to have. You don't have to worry that people aren't going to like them if you don't do what you want all the time. People actually respect you more when you're able to say no when you don't want to do something, but that you're also able to say yes when you do. And by the way, it feels so much better when you do something you want to do because you chose to. Also begin challenging negative thought patterns. Painful thoughts will continue to come into your mind from seemingly nowhere. This happens to everybody, but you don't have to entertain them or accept them as truth. Challenge them and send them on their way. Work on challenging cognitive distortions. If you think someone doesn't like you or is thinking bad thoughts about you, ask yourself if you're mind reading and then let go of that thought. Remember the quote, "It's none of your business what people think about you." Start some daily affirmations for yourself. Remember, we said to write down, "I am fearfully and wonderfully made," and tape it up somewhere you can see it. Have some other ones that are true and put them up. Write down things you like about yourself and put that up in places and make it a point to view those daily. Another good way to improve your self esteem is to start a self discovery journey. Oftentimes, we don't really know who we are, and that's why we feel like we're not worthy. Understand who you are. Start a journey of self discovery. Often, people with low self esteem have been lied to about themselves for so long, they don't really know who they are internally. So, who are you? In your journey, start with a notebook. Put some blank pages in it and then write headings on these pages. And then, as you have time, go in and fill it out. Keep it in your healing space, maybe. So some of the headings could be my positive characteristics, being honest with yourself. Are you kind? Are you an honest person? Are you humble? Are you joyful? Do you help others? What are your positive characteristics? And then write down evidence of when you've done those things, because that will prove to you that you have those traits. Another one is writing a list of things you enjoy. Have a heading of that. Get to know yourself. Do you enjoy reading or do you read because you were told you had to? Do you enjoy exercise or running or playing golf or playing tennis or something else? What do you enjoy? What are things you dislike? You might be surprised at this. Maybe you're continuing to do some things you dislike because other people do it and that makes you feel accepted. Is it worth that to continue it? Write down your strengths. Are your strengths that you're good with numbers, that you're good with words, that you are a giving person and generous? What are your strengths? Another one is to know your weaknesses. How can you improve those? What's your personality? And by that I mean, are you introverted, extroverted? Are you someone who is um, really funny and lighthearted? Are you more of a um, person with gravitas and seriousness? Who are you in that way? What are things you do well? What are things you want to improve? What are goals you want to set? And also have a page just for your achievements, things you've done that you're really proud of. If you've learned how to do some basic skills in life and that's all you can think of, write those down. Have you learned to walk? Have you learned to read? Have you learned to cook? What can you cook? You may not be a chef, but can you make a basic meal? Can you do your own laundry? Did you graduate high school? Have you learned special skills? Can you work on a car mechanically? That's quite a skill. There are a lot of skills out there that we don't always recognize. So, what are your achievements and your skills? It's also very important to begin some positive self care. The reason for this is when we care for ourselves in different ways, we show that we have value to ourselves. So, this is a really important thing not to skip over. You may not have time to attend to each of these areas of life every day, but it is important on a regular basis to do so. And when we think of self care, we often think of just the physical self care: food, clothing, shelter, sleep, water. That's what we usually think of, and that is pretty important, but there are so many other layers to this. So, those are the very basic layers of self care. More importantly, are you eating food that's nutritious? Are you wearing clothes that make you feel good about yourself? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you exercising in ways that you find enjoyable that are also healthy? There's also emotional self care, and that's recognizing what you feel. So, do you know your emotions? Managing those emotions, challenging the emotions that may not be honest to what the situation is. It can also be listening to music and allowing yourself to have positive self talk. There's nothing wrong with it. You're not going to become egotistical by saying nice things to yourself, and it's not wrong. The next layer of self care is intellectual. This can include learning new things, it can include working on hobbies, reading, having stimulating conversations with others. Don't forget spiritual. Prayer is so important. If you're not sure of any of the things that we've worked on, like what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your personality is like, pray about that. Ask God to reveal that to you. He knows all of those things about you, and He will. Bible reading is also incredibly important and can help us grow spiritually and know the heart of God more. And in doing so, He reveals more to us about ourselves. Attending church is very important because we develop bonds with other believers who are also not perfect, but can also reflect back God's love to us. And singing is a really good spiritual thing to do. It always helps us to feel better if you enjoy singing. And of course, there's social self care. This includes having healthy relationships with others, setting healthy boundaries, and also being assertive, saying no when you mean it, yes when you want to, and following through on those, and speaking up for your own needs. Assertiveness is not aggressiveness. Assertiveness is standing up for yourself with respect for other people as well. Does self-acceptance mean you have to accept all of the things about yourself that you don't like? Well, in terms of acceptance being acknowledging it to be truth, if it's true, yes, we need to accept it. Does that mean we can never change it? No, there are ways to change things you really don't like. Some things we can't change. It's hard to change your height if you're fully grown. But there are things we can do. So decide what you don't like. Do you feel like you want to lose or gain weight? Do you want to develop a new skill? Do you want to change a bad habit? Do you want to be more comfortable in social settings? Set goals for these things. Make sure they're realistic goals. Decide on a way to set them. There's another video in Faithful Healing Journeys on how to set and achieve goals. Read through that, listen to that, learn how to set really good goals and make changes in your life that you want. Also, equally important to finding what you want to change is deciding what you want to keep. What are the things you like about yourself, just the way you are, that you think, I really like that I'm organized and I don't want to change that. I want to add in spontaneity, but I love my organizational skills. So in short, what would it take to be enough? And by enough, I mean good enough, pretty enough, smart enough, all those things that when we have low self-esteem, we tell ourselves we're not enough of this to be acceptable. The reality is that we accept other people who struggle in those areas even more than we do, and we don't think twice about it. But we demand perfectionism of ourselves. And if perfection is achievable, it's not in this world. Accept that you're not perfect. You're not going to be perfect, but you can still strive to be as good as you can in this world. Keep changing, keep growing. Develop a mindset of growing and learning that Learn that failure is an opportunity to grow and improve. It is not a judgment on who you are as a person or your value or your worth. Continue learning. Watch other videos on boundaries, goals, and upcoming videos on many other topics. Have a mindset of self-improvement, and that's a good way to see the changes in you that you're making. Track your improvements. Measure them on a scale of 1 to 10. This is where my self-esteem is now. A month from now, take that same measurement. A month from them, the same thing. And you can start to see your self-improvement, your self-esteem changing as you make self-improvements. Follow Faithful Healing Journeys, learn more, and share with some other friends who might also struggle with self-esteem or other issues. When we help others, it helps us to grow and it gives us purpose. And we learn our problems can help other people and can help ourselves. I hope this has been helpful to you. Thank you for joining Faithful Healing Journeys. Subscribe for more videos to continue learning and growing and improving how you feel about yourself. Thank you.